Well, kia ora koutou. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. On Wednesday last week, I announced as Associate Finance Minister that the government would support a shovel-ready construction project at the Green School in Taranaki. The decision that I made to support this project was an error of judgment for which I apologise. If I was making the same decision again, I would not support the project. Over the last few days, I've read countless emails and seen people's comments on social media. And I've met with a variety of organisations, including the PPTA, the NZEI and the Principals Association. I'd like to thank everyone who has taken the time to write, call or meet with me in person. And I want you to know that I have taken the time to reflect on your concerns and I'm acting on them. Becoming a minister means being willing to question your decisions in public and, if necessary, to correct them, and that's what I'm doing. But first I want to take a moment to provide some background as to how we got here. Over the past 3 months, this government has set aside $3 billion for infrastructure projects in order to help guide New Zealand through the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Every dollar we have invested to create jobs. Jobs that provide people with a good day's pay, doing meaningful work, building a better future for New Zealand. One of the sectors most at risk as a result of the downturn is infrastructure and construction. So what we have done is to connect as many ready-to-work New Zealanders as possible with ready-to-be-filled jobs, and in so doing, help people to maintain the stability and security that a good job brings to their families. This also helps to boost local economies, because when more people are in work, more money is directed into the parts of the economy where most people earn their livelihood. Whether it's selling food in a cafe, running a local business, providing services to the community, or providing after-school care, these are the parts of the economy that are sustained when public investment is directed at getting people into work and earning money that they can then spend in their local communities. When the Mayor of New Plymouth first told me about the Green School, what I saw was an opportunity to employ hundreds of people on an environmentally friendly building project in the area of the country impacted the most by our government's decision to switch to clean sources of energy. These are the reasons why the Green School was supported, but no excuses. It was, as I said, an error of judgment on my part. One of the questions that I have been asked most over the past few days is this: why is the government providing support for construction at the Green School when there are public schools all over the country with leaky roofs, mouldy classrooms, and not enough books on the shelves? And it is a fair question. And let's be clear why it is a fair question. The previous national government left children all over the country learning in schools and classrooms that were run down and cold. So if you work at or you send your children to a school that was systematically underfunded for the 9 years that National were in power, then yes, you are going to be angry, and rightfully so. Our government is investing close to $2 billion to upgrade our schools, deal with deferred maintenance and start building new schools. We are also helping schools to switch to clean, climate-friendly ways of keeping children warm and keeping the lights on. Every dollar of this investment is about ensuring that future generations of students and teachers get the schools that they deserve. But underlying much of the disappointment people have felt over the past few days is the simple fact that the money is not getting into communities fast enough. Teachers are looking around their classrooms and they are still seeing sagging walls and mould on the roofs, and that needs to change. If the last few days have shown us anything, it is that New Zealanders are incredibly passionate about their public education system. The Green Party shares that passion. Our decades-long commitment to public education has not changed. We are as clear as ever that a well-funded public education is the most effective way to give our children the best possible start in life. The concerns that people have raised about the government's support for the Green School is as much about the decision itself as it is about what kind of New Zealand people want for the future. A New Zealand where every child, no matter where they are from, has access to the best possible education in the communities that they call home. A New Zealand where public education harnesses the talents of all of our children. A New Zealand where public education is the route through which we address the vast inequalities that we see across the country. These are the issues that are at stake when we talk about education in New Zealand. And these are the issues that the Green Party has always been equal to. And at the end of the day, these issues are bigger than being seen to apologise or losing a 48-hour news cycle. Progress towards our better future demands tough choices. Not every one of those choices is going to be the right one. So again, I apologise. I apologise to parents, to teachers and to unions. I apologise to Green Party members who have been working tirelessly in their communities to make sure that the Greens are a part of the next government and have felt demoralised by this decision. I apologise to the schools in Taranaki who, quite rightfully, want the best for their children. And I want you to know, all of you, that I have listened to your concerns. My understanding is that the Green School has approached representatives of the Crown to find a solution. These discussions can take time, and whatever you think of the process, ministers cannot insert themselves into commercial negotiations. But I hope that everyone involved will take the time to reflect how strongly people feel about this and take those views into account in those discussions. My personal view is that the best way to do this would for the support for the Green School to come in the form of a loan rather than a grant. And that would ensure that the money is paid back in full. One thing I have learned, and in fact have believed for a very long time, is that when you make a mistake, you should learn from it for the future. Then you regroup and redirect your energy into making positive change happen, and you go forward. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
What's the status of pressure did you feel to do this, and when did you come to this decision that this is how you would have to act? Was it one thing, or was it a series of pressures?
Well, it was very apparent very shortly after the announcement was made that there was a huge amount of public dissatisfaction with that decision, and so it was clear to me very early on that I had made an error of judgment.
Why didn't you reflect on that beforehand?
Well, I think ultimately this was one of somewhere between 40 and 50 projects that I was actively supporting, and amongst the plethora of other things I was dealing with, I just did not give it the attention that it deserved.
What's the status of the contract? How concerning for you were the connections between the Green School and this couple who believe that COVID is manufactured, that use the school as to host crystal planting ceremonies?
I think that we should leave the parents out of it. I am clear that I'm wearing this, and it's not the parents who are involved.
What is the status of the money and the grant in terms of, is there a commercial contract in place? Can you just tell us where that's all at in terms of the money and going to the actual school? There's
a contracting relationship between Crown Infrastructure Partners and the school. It's not appropriate as a minister for me to get into the middle of that.
So it's not just a matter of the chances then, if there's already a commercial contract in place, what are the chances then of being able to actually change it, especially as it's significant, that significant implication? And what indications from the school have you got, if any, about whether they would be willing to make that contractual change?
Well, as Grant said in his stand-up on Friday, the government has made a commitment to this in good faith, and that if the school wants to vary that, then that's obviously a possibility.
It's up to them to agree to a loan as opposed to a grant?
Well, I can't insert myself into what is a commercial relationship. The school themselves, of course, has been very badly affected by this and want to find a way through.
Minister, it's not a matter of the parents, and I want to kind of besmirch the name of the parents, but the school itself was being used as a location for Lionsgate abundance and manifestation ceremonies,
crystal plantings, is that something that you wanted to be pouring taxpayer money into?
Like I said, I'm not going to get dragged into stories about the parents.
It's not about the parents, it's about the location, it's about what the school is being used
No,
for.
your story is about what the parents are doing as part of the school community, and I'm not going to drag them into that. I'm sorry.
That first tour,
did you look into what the school was about, or did you just look at the jobs?
I looked at so I was given, so when Neil Holdham, who's the Mayor of New Plymouth, came to see me about it, he introduced me to the couple who have started the school. And so we did talk about it. Ironically, one of the things that I said to them is, are you sure you want to come to the Crown for money? Because often government money is more trouble than it's worth. But they were clear at that point that the project would not proceed, and the Mayor was quite keen for it to proceed.
But you didn't. But the question was, were you just looking at the jobs, or did you do any due diligence on what the school was?
Well, it's not. So I looked at the website, obviously, and had tried to get myself familiar with what they were doing. But ultimately, due diligence is a process that's not undertaken by ministers' offices. That is undertaken by, the agencies of the Crown, such as Crown Infrastructure Partners.
But looking at the website, no alarm bells rang for you.
Well, again, like I said, there were a lot of projects that I was supporting, including, cycleways, busways, hydrogen refuelling network. It was not something that I spent sufficient time on.
What was the Treasury advice, and did they back the business case and this grant?
No, I think on this, so the advice around all of the projects was mixed between the different agencies that we got. On this one, the initial assessment from the Infrastructure Reference Group, I think, gave it something like a 4.2 or 4.3 out of 5, so it was quite highly rated in terms of its...
What about Treasury?
No, Treasury went in another direction on this project.
Yeah, so can you explain what the Treasury advice was and how much that was predicated on international students and obviously the situation with the border, or did they have other concerns about it?
I don't have the Treasury advice.
Did you try to get this money back? Did you try to get the $11.7 million back from the school?
Like I said, it's now a contracting relationship between the school and the Crown, which ministers can't interfere with. And as Grant said, the Crown did make this decision based on a series of other criteria, and the Crown isn't about to walk away from that commitment.
But you talked to ministerial colleagues about trying to
get that money. Well, I certainly talked to them about whether they wanted to, and I checked with Crown Infrastructure Partners about whether that was even possible. But ultimately,
so you had tried to get that taxpayer money back.
I looked into the possibility, and ultimately the decision was that the Crown had made this in good faith, and that we would continue in good faith.
How much damage do you think this has done to the Green Party brand? Do you think this has pushed you under the 5% threshold?
Well, it's no secret. I guess the evidence of that will be on election day, but and it's no secret that we are sort of hovering at around the 5% threshold. So it is a risk, and I understand that. Ultimately, we know that we've got to get out and make the case for why the Greens need to be part of the next Parliament and a good partner to Labour in the next government.
From your members, right? That must be deeply concerning for the party.
As I said in my opening comments, yes.
When you apologised to the party, when you made that statement there, what kind of feedback and what volume of feedback have you had from them about this decision? And would you be making this sort of backflip if we were at a different point in the election cycle?
Well, I think the election cycle has certainly exacerbated the issue, right? But ultimately, like I said, actually there was a policy that I contravened because I simply didn't think to look at it, because I was looking at it through the lens of it being a construction project. And so that was the call that I had with Green Party members on Friday night, where I sort of talked through that. I think in either case, it would still have been an error of judgment, right, for two reasons, one of which was that there was actually clear party policy. But the other of which, of course, is that, in my view, that the decision was insensitive, given where most of our public schools are actually at in terms of their own cycle.
What about that volume of feedback from the party members?
Well, it's been high.
Did you seek counsel of your caucus colleagues before?
Sorry?
Did you seek counsel from any of your caucus colleagues before you decided to back this?
The nature of it is that it was a budget confidential decision, so it can't be shared beyond ministers' offices. So it was not, I need to be clear about that, it was not a caucus decision. So we had a conversation as a caucus very early on in the process where we said, okay, the government has decided to deploy this $3 billion in infrastructure. We had some concerns based on our experience of the $8 billion Upgrade New Zealand package that was launched in late January about the direction of travel. And so we put together an exclusions list that included things like, motorways and, a whole series of other things that we thought would lock in a really high emission future. I did not think to include at that point a wider kind of Green Party policy analysis, right? So that was, in a process sense, that was where my error was at that point in the process. And I think it was because, to some extent, my experience was shaped by a concern that we could end up, particularly with a shovel-ready analysis, with high carbon intensive projects that had been started years before under the national government, which we wouldn't necessarily want to see, but which would end up getting, proceeding because their need was to stimulate the economy in very short order. So that was the lens that I looked at it through, rather than kind of through this kind of wider lens of other public policy.
Sorry, Inti Māori. He aha tai ki ngā kura kaupapa Māori e hohāna kia koutou te Pāti Kākāriki.
Ai marama te kite he tino hoha tēnei tātunga o te karaina o te minita ki ngā kura kaupapa Māori, he mihi atu, he whakapāho atu kia rātou, marama te kite kei te he tēnei whakataunga, nō reira ka tai mai ki tēnei rā, ki te tuku atu te whakapāho atu kia rātou, ki ngā kura hapuri katoa, ki te whakakaha i te tautoko o ngā kākariki mō ngā kura hapuri, ngā kura Māori hoki.
E heke i hoa me tiri i tana tūranga i hapa ia i tērā atu ko whiringa pōti. E mataku ana koe ka pērā anō tēnei āhuaranga kia koutou te Pāti?
Nā tērā heke iho, nā me tiria tērā heke iho, i tēnei wā kari te pai mō te Pāti, mō te iwi katoa, te haere atu o James Shaw, nō reira kei te whakahe ai, ko te mahi i nāianei ki te whakatika.
Mana, do you recognise that the funding of this, or do you recognise that this may have jeopardised the Green Party's chances of returning to Parliament?
It's very clear this was a mistake, that it goes against our policy and our long-standing position to support public education. That's why, as James Shaw has just said, we'll be working really hard to make it clear that we are the party who want to have a stable climate for our great-grandchildren, who want to protect nature, who want to make sure everyone has what they need to live good lives. We'll be focusing on that work from this point, as we already have been.
To answer my question, do you recognise that this may have jeopardised your chances of returning?
Oh, look, I thought I said that at the beginning, my apologies. It's very clear, there's no denying that already we were hovering around 5%. We have to work very, very hard. That's why we are here, apologising and showing to people that we know this was a mistake decision.
And given that the caucus wasn't able to be part of that decision, how frustrating is that for the broader Green Party caucus that this has happened without you guys having any say in the matter?
What made it really constructive was that very early on, James fronted up to us internally, was able to own that this was a decision mistake. Very early on, the party, because we are a political party that takes its strengths from our members, we very quickly organised and fronted up to all of our members. We made it available to all of our members to have an opportunity for them to be heard, for us to explain how this decision was made, and to apologise to our members. That was all done very quickly, and the feedback from that opportunity call on Friday night is that the members definitely appreciated. I'm also clear that the members stood up strong for public education because that is what our party believes in.
James, why did it take until today to make the announcement? Were you sort of hoping that on the Friday, when you talk to your members, it would go away?
No, not at all. We were wanting to work on a solution. There have been discussions external to the Green Party that solution has depended on. James has just outlined the process of arriving to a solution. We were hoping to be able to speak publicly with a solution. That hasn't been able to happen in time, so we are making it clear now that this was a mistake. We are apologising, and we hope to see a solution as well.
James, can I just get some clarity on that, the contract? So is it an agreement in principle, or like is it so far gone that there's really no walking back? What stage of the agreement is this at?
So I don't know exactly, because ministers don't get involved in those negotiations, but we only make an announcement of one of these projects when it is sufficiently far in advance that it is going to happen. And as Grant said on Friday, the government did go into this on a series of merits and made that decision in good faith. And the Crown doesn't want to walk away from its commitments, having made them.
Why do you consider?
So hang on, I just want to let...
Just on one sort of government question. I was looking today at the Crown Infrastructure Partners education infrastructure pipeline. Looks like there's loads of public school projects in there. I mean, why did you or any other ministers in that infrastructure group not look at that list of projects and bring those public school projects through?
I can't tell you about there was something like, there were literally thousands of projects on the long list. A huge number of them were deemed, the vast majority were deemed as not sufficiently ready to go. And this was a project that was scored quite highly in terms of its readiness to go. And frankly, it's moved around a lot as well, as things have developed. So there were things that got sort of reasonably far advanced, then, kind of fell over for one reason or another, whether that was in due diligence or because it was discovered that there, that there was a more appropriate way of doing it. Sorry, Luke.
You were saying how the government entered this in good faith.
Yes.
Obviously, the school did as well, regardless of what you think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you feel as the guy who was backing this, who has now essentially said to the school, well, actually, if I could claw the money back? I mean, what does that do for your reputation, for people who go to you to support their project?
Well, you have to understand that this has not worked out well for the school either, right? So their reputation has taken a battering. It's a very difficult situation, obviously, for parents and people involved. But the point is that there is a huge amount of public frustration that whatever you think about the process and whatever you think about that particular school, that whilst there are still many schools in New Zealand that haven't yet seen the funding that is needed for them to, even do basic maintenance, that is an incredibly frustrating decision.
Why do you think that a loan or converting it into a loan is the solution? It's still a huge chunk of change that other schools wouldn't have access to.
Well, the point there would be simply that the reasons why the government supported the project, which was to, stimulate the local economy in Taranaki, provide those construction projects, that would then still proceed. So they would get the economic benefit of the project, which was the point of the whole fund. And at the same time, it wouldn't have an impact on Crown finances. And so that money could be cycled into other things.
Isn't this any consideration at all to stepping down as co-leader?
No. I don't think this is a resignation level event. I do think that, I am, going quite a long way to say that it was an error of judgment.
Do you feel you say the process is still acting out in good faith, but isn't that kind of all making a mockery of it, because the funding's been announced and as you say, it was far along enough to be announced, and now you're coming out and saying you want it to be a loan, and isn't that just making a mockery?
Well, like I said, that is a personal view, because ministers cannot and should not interject, into the middle of what is a commercial relationship.
Do you feel embarrassed about how this has all played out?
Yes.
James, can I just ask how personally this is for you, knowing that your actions may have jeopardised the future of the party that you love?
Well, look, I feel terrible about the way that this has played out, right? And that's why I'm saying that it was an error of judgment. I am owning it personally, and there are kind of many ironies and stories that I may tell about this one day. But ultimately, it was my choice to back this project alongside a whole series of other projects, and it has not gone well for anyone involved.
And if the Greens don't make it back into Parliament?
I believe that we will, but there is a risk.
What does this say about the quality of the broader decision-making around these shovel-ready projects, that the minister can sort of be rushing to something without actually doing that due diligence? Is there, do you think there are wider concerns about the process under which these shovel-ready projects have been pushed through?
Yes. Sam, actually, I mean, this is one of the ironies I was just referring to. It's actually always been my view that ministers should not be making these decisions. That actually we should have, that ideally something like the Infrastructure Reference Group or Crown Infrastructure Partners or a development bank would actually be a more appropriate way for those kinds of decisions to get made. Ultimately, we were in a situation where we were going through the pandemic crisis. We needed to move extremely quickly. A decision was made about how that process would play out. We were shaped, shall I say, by our experience of the Upgrade New Zealand infrastructure package, and we felt that as long as the decision was going to be made that way, that we needed a minister who was involved in it to try and ensure that, to the maximum extent possible, that the $3 billion was invested in trying to solve some of the long-term challenges facing New Zealand, like climate change, not just deal with the short-term imperative to create employment.
How quickly was that decision made?
Sorry, say that again?
How long was that? How long did it take to make that decision?
I'm actually not sure. I think that the decision was made in early May that we would have that the overall package would come about. And it went through, I mean, it was shall we just say, a very iterative process involving, a number of agencies and many rounds with ministers involved. So I couldn't tell you precisely when the decision about this particular project was made, but you know that the opposition has, for example, said, can you please release the whole list all at once? We actually haven't been able to because different projects have been in different stages of due diligence or, in some cases, haven't gotten swapped out for other projects for various reasons. So, in fact, my understanding is not all of the projects have still been announced.
Within that
$3 billion packet,
say that again?
Within that $3 billion pool of funding, do you suspect that there are other dodgy projects?
Oh, look, I couldn't say. There were a whole series of projects that I kept an eye on, if you like. They included a number of cycleway projects right around the country. For example, the Faux Pathway in Auckland, a whole series of projects around Christchurch and others, some busways, some urban redevelopment projects in Tauranga and Portiki and Queenstown. A climate resilience package of flood defences in various parts of the country, a hydrogen refuelling network run by Heating Energy for heavy trucking. So there was something somewhere between 40 and 50 projects, but I wasn't, kind of keeping an eye on the whole package and ultimately wasn't responsible for the whole package.
Do you think this funding decision hurts your ability to work constructively with Labor, given you signal that your goal after this election is to form a government with them?
No, I think the most important thing, as I said before, is to learn from your mistakes and to incorporate what you learn into future decisions.
Are you
all right,
concerned,
thanks everyone.
Concerned at all?
Cheers.
And now featuring Petal Search, your gateway to 1 million apps. And now featuring Petal Search, your gateway to 1 million apps.